The next time you take an Uber, you are going to see a number on your phone. Let's say it is $48.55. Now here is what you will never see. Your driver, the person sitting 3 feet in front of you, driving the exact same miles, on the exact same trip, at the exact same minute, is looking at a completely different number. In one real documented case there said $15.96. Same car, same road, same moment. You paid 48, he earned 16, and neither of you is allowed to see the other's screen. If you take even a couple of rides a month, you have been sitting inside that gap for years. Dozens of times, hundreds of times, and not once has anyone shown you both halves of it. Now, you probably assume the difference is just Uber's commission, a cut, a percentage. It isn't, not anymore. And I am not going to editorialize here because Uber has already explained it better than I could. In its own documentation for drivers, the company describes charging them a variable service fee, which is the difference between the rider price and what a driver earns. Sit with that sentence. The fee is not a percentage of the fare. The fee is whatever is left over. Two different algorithms decide two different numbers, and the gap between them, whatever it happens to be that day on that trip for that driver, is the business. That is what this video is about. Not an app for taxis, but the quiet deletion of the one number that used to keep everybody honest. But first, let me be fair, because this is where these videos usually cheat. Uber's convenience was not marketing, it was real. Cashless, tracked by GPS, a name and a plate and a receipt every single time, rated in both directions, no standing on a corner with your arm out, no sorry I only take cash, no drivers refusing to go to your neighborhood. If you are a woman traveling alone at night or anybody a cab wouldn't stop for, that was a genuine upgrade in safety and dignity, and pretending otherwise would be a lie. The flexibility is real too. A lot of drivers work a few hours around another job or around childcare and genuinely value being able to switch the app off. And all of this is perfectly legal. This is a story about a business model, not a crime. And here is the part almost nobody says out loud. The thing Uber destroyed was itself a rigged system. The taxi medallion was artificial scarcity, a laminated tin token, deliberately limited, whose price got pumped past $1 million by speculators and lenders, gate-kept by fleet owners who leased cabs to drivers on brutal terms. Nobody should be nostalgic for that. So this is not a story about good guys and bad guys. It is a story about one opaque, extractive system being replaced by a newer, smarter, far less visible one. Because to understand what Uber actually did, you have to understand what a taxi meter was. The meter was a public number. It sat on the dashboard where both of you could see it. It ticked at a rate the city had published, and, this is the important part, it was symmetrical. The rider paid what the meter said. The driver earned off that same meter. One number, visible to both parties, governing both sides of the deal. It was a crude piece of machinery, but it made the transaction legible. You could argue about whether the rate was fair, but you could not be confused about what it was. Uber's real innovation was not the map, or the app, or the little car moving across your screen. It was killing that number. At first, it didn't look like that. For years, Uber took a straightforward commission, 20%, then 25%, and the company publicly promised drivers they would keep 75% of the fare. You can argue about the size of that cut, but at least it was a cut. It was a percentage of something you could both point at. Then, starting in 2022 and rolling out city by city through 2024, Uber changed how it pays drivers. Lyft did its own version the same year. They called it upfront fares, and it was sold as clarity. Now the driver sees exactly what a trip pays before accepting it, and that part is true. But underneath, something else happened. Your fare and your driver's pay stopped being connected. Two separate systems now calculate two separate numbers. As the National Employment Law Project, a worker advocacy group, puts it, the companies began using algorithms to determine driver pay and passenger fares separately, without any connection between the two. Which means that 75% promise didn't get broken. It got something worse. It became unmeasurable. You cannot enforce a percentage floor when nobody on either end of the trip can see both numbers. So how big is the gap? Honestly, nobody outside the company knows for certain, and that is the point. But several groups have tried to measure it, and I am going to give you their numbers and Uber's response to them. because you deserve both. That worker advocacy group NALP estimates the effective cut in the US climbed from around 32% to around 42% after upfront pricing arrived, and says it sometimes hits 65 or 70% on individual rides. A Consumer Reports investigation put the company's share of a fare at between 43 and 49.5%. And a study out of Oxford, which analyzed 1.5 million trips from UK drivers over 8 years, found something subtler and maybe more damning. That Uber's cut is, in their words, no longer stable but varies trip by trip, with the median driver share sliding from 75% down to 71%, and the cut on some individual rides passing 50%. Uber disputes these figures, and its objection is not frivolous. The company argues those calculations wrongly fold in things like commercial insurance and taxes, and its chief executive has said the real US take is closer to 15 to 20% once insurance is stripped out. For its part, Uber's own reported number, the segment revenue it keeps against everything riders book, runs around 30%. So, somewhere between 15 and 70, depending on who is counting and which trip you pick. That range is not a failure of research. That range is the product. And there is one more detail that tells you how much the company values that fog. Until early 2025, Uber published its global rideshare take rate in every quarterly report to shareholders. Then it simply stopped including it. The last external window into the gap closed during the same stretch that free cash flow went from about $3 billion to roughly $7 billion. Now a harder question. Is that gap the same for everybody? Here, the evidence gets genuinely interesting, and I have to be careful because we are moving from what is documented to what is disputed. What is documented is this. Consumer Reports tested 30 routes across 17 states, pricing them within minutes of each other. Every single route came back with at least 2 different price groups. The median gap between the cheapest and most expensive quote for the same route was about 42%. On one Kansas City route, their testers generated 29 different prices for 55 potential customers. Same road, same moment, 29 answers. Separate tests on the driver's side found drivers offered different pay for identical rides. Researchers have a name for the driver version of this. A Columbia Law Review paper by the legal scholar Veena Dubal called it algorithmic wage discrimination. The idea that a platform can personalize pay to what each individual worker seems willing to accept. That is her framing, and it is contested. And here is the other side, which belongs in this video. Uber flatly denies it. The company told NBC News it does not personalize prices, period. Lyft says its prices reflect trip characteristics, real-time supply and demand, and disclosed promotions. No regulator has found otherwise. So the honest statement is the narrow one. Prices and pay demonstrably vary a lot for near identical trips at the same moment. Whether that variation is personal asterisk to you is alleged by researchers and denied by the companies. But step back, because you should ask who paid for all of this. And the answer is you did, and then you did again. For roughly a decade, Uber lost money on a scale that is genuinely hard to picture. By the end of 2022, its accumulated deficit sat at about $32.8 billion. That is from Uber's own filings. Not all of that was cheap fares. It also includes stock compensation, self-driving research, and huge write-downs on foreign investments. But a great deal of it went into exactly what you'd guess: the low-cost rides and driver bonuses bought to win the market. One widely cited analysis estimated that in 2015, passengers were paying only about 41% of what their trip actually cost. The rest was covered by investors, including around $9 billion from SoftBank's Vision Fund and $3.5 billion from Saudi Arabia's Sovereign Wealth Fund. There is a name for this strategy. It is called blitz scaling. Absorb losses your competitors cannot survive, take the market, then extract. Economists have described the fare side of it as resembling predatory pricing, though I should be precise, Uber was never convicted of that, and it is famously hard to prove. It worked. The meter died. And what happened to the people holding the old system is bleaker than the simple version you have heard. The story is usually Uber killed the taxi, but the New York Times investigation that won the Pulitzer for explaining this found something else came first: a lending bubble. Between 2002 and 2014, medallion prices were pumped from around $200,000 to over $1 million, while drivers' actual incomes barely moved on reckless loans, some structured so a driver would repay more than $1.7 million. Then Uber and Lyft pulled away the riders whose fares were servicing those loans, and the whole thing collapsed. Medallions that averaged $1.3 million in 2014 were trading under $200,000 by 2018. Nearly 1,000 medallion owner-drivers filed for bankruptcy, and at least 8 drivers took their own lives. The bubble and the disruption killed that trade together. So the subsidy expired and the bill arrived, and it arrived on both sides at once. For you, prices went up. One analysis found rider prices rose about 92% between 2018 and 2021. For the driver, something structural was already in place. Because a driver is not an employee. That single classification means the driver buys the car, buys the gas, buys the insurance, and absorbs the depreciation. The IRS reckons a vehicle costs roughly 72 cents a mile to run. All in, and every one of those miles costs the driver that, whether it was a paid fare or an empty drive across town to a pickup. What does that leave? Genuinely, it depends who you ask, and the estimates are all over the map. So here is the honest spread. An MIT working paper in 2018 calculated a median of $3.37 an hour after vehicle costs, but Uber attacked the methodology, and to his credit, the lead author agreed and revised it upward to $8.55. The Economic Policy Institute put it at $11.77 an hour after expenses, or about $9.21 once you subtract the value of the benefits an employee would get. And Uber says its median driver earns around $33 an hour, but read that number carefully because it counts only utilized time, which means the meter of their pay only runs once a passenger is in the car, and it's before any of those expenses. That is the whole disagreement in one word. Drivers spend something like 30% of their time logged in and available and unpaid. Waiting is not utilized. So when the company says 33 and a study says 9, they are often both being technically accurate about 2 completely different clocks. And because there is no employment relationship, the same system that dispatches you can also switch you off. A 2025 survey of deactivated New York drivers found that 70% of Uber's deactivations and 76% of Lyft's came with no prior notice, and 95% of those drivers said their appeal went nowhere. The companies say they have review processes and safety obligations, but you can see the asymmetry. An employee gets a process, a contractor gets a notification. So what is this company really now that the subsidies are gone? Uber owns no cars, it employs no drivers. It holds no restaurant inventory. What it owns is the match, and it takes a slice of every one. For every dollar riders spent in 2024, Uber kept roughly 30 cents as revenue in ride-hailing and about 18 cents in delivery. That produced $44 billion of revenue and about $2.8 billion in operating profit. You may have seen a much bigger number, nearly $10 billion, reported as its profit that year. That figure was boosted by one-time non-cash accounting items, mostly a tax adjustment. The honest operating number is the smaller one. But watch where the growth actually is. Uber now runs an advertising business, sponsored listings, in-app placements, ads on the screen while you wait, that has crossed a $2 billion a year run rate. Uber describes advertising as one of the highest margin things it does, for the obvious reason it costs almost nothing extra to sell an ad to somebody who is already sitting in your app, waiting. And then there is Uber One, the subscription, which went from 30 million members at the end of 2024 to more than 50 million by spring of 2026. And those members now account for more than half of everything booked across rides and delivery. Put it together and the shape of the real business appears. The ride is not the product, the ride is the customer acquisition. The margin compounds in the ad network, the subscription, and the tuning of that spread, all of it fed by knowing where you go, when, and what you'll pay. So who ends up holding what? Uber's shareholders went from $30 billion in losses to roughly $7 billion a year in free cash flow. The ad business monetizes attention it already owns at almost no extra cost. The subscription makes leaving expensive, And at the bottom of it, one person supplies the car, the fuel, the insurance, the depreciation, and the unpaid waiting, and finds out what the job paid only after it is done. None of this is illegal. It is disclosed, it is clever, and it is enormously profitable, and this is analysis, not advice. The reveal was never that somebody is a villain. It is that we traded a crude, visible public number, a meter on a dashboard that both people could read, for a system where the fare and the wage are calculated in separate rooms, and the only party who gets to see both numbers is the one keeping the difference. So next time you're in the back seat, try something. Ask your driver what that ride paid them. Then put your number next to theirs in the comments. Because the single most radical thing you can do to a two-sided black box is get the two sides talking to each other.